My name is Emily Carter. I'm 30 years old. And the strange thing about the moment your life begins to split open is that it rarely sounds like a disaster when it starts. There's no shouting at first, no shattered glass, no cinematic argument loud enough to warn you that something irreversible is already happening. Sometimes it enters quietly, dressed like a normal conversation, wrapped in a calm voice, hidden inside a sentence that sounds reasonable until you realize what it actually means. 3 weeks ago, I was engaged to a man named Daniel Whitmore. We had been together for 2.5 years, engaged for 3 months. And for most of that time, I believed I knew exactly who he was. I'm the daughter of refugees. My parents came to this country in 1991 with 2 suitcases, no English, and me, 3 years old, wrapped in a blanket my grandmother had made. That blanket is still on their couch. It's worn now, threadbare in places, but my mother refuses to throw it away. She says it reminds her of where we started. My father had been an engineer back home. Here, he worked at a meatpacking plant for 4 years. 4 years of cold floors, long hours, and work that slowly broke down his body. Eventually, he got a job as a maintenance technician at a hotel chain. Better, but still hard. My mother cleaned houses, then offices, then hospital rooms on the night shift so she could be home when I got off the school bus. They never complained. Not once. Not about the language barrier. Not about the exhaustion. Not about the way people would speak to them slowly and loudly, like volume could translate dignity. They just worked. And every spare dollar went into 2 things: rent and my education. I got into a state school. Partial scholarship, not full. My parents covered the rest. To this day, I don't know how. I honestly don't know how 2 people making a combined $58,000 a year managed to put me through college with 0 debt. And still keep the lights on. But they did. My father once told me he didn't buy a new pair of work boots for 3 years so they could pay my sophomore housing deposit. 3 years. Same boots. Resoled twice. I graduated, got into software engineering, worked my way up. I'm a senior developer now, making about $142,000 a year. Not wealthy, but comfortable. Very comfortable compared to where I started. And since my first real paycheck, I've sent my parents money. Every month. No exceptions. It started at $800, then $1,000, then $1,500. Now, it's been $1,500 a month for years. They never asked for it. I insisted. My father actually tried to refuse it the first 3 months. He would transfer it back into my account like clockwork. So I adjusted. I set up an automatic transfer to my mother instead, because I knew she wouldn't send it back. She would just quietly use it to fix things my father was too proud to admit needed fixing. A broken water heater, dental work he kept postponing, property taxes that came due at the worst times. They're in their mid-60s now. My father retired last year. His knees finally gave out. My mother still works part-time, but she's slowing down. They own their home outright, paid it off in 2019. But their savings? Thin. Social Security covers the basics. My $1,500 covers everything else. And to me, that's not generosity. That's math. That's the smallest repayment I can make for a debt I will never fully settle. Daniel knew about all of this early on. I told him on maybe our 4th date, because I believe money is something you talk about honestly when things start getting serious. He smiled, said he thought it was sweet. That was the word he used. Sweet. At the time, I took that as understanding. Now I realize it was distance. 3 months ago, we got engaged, and that's when everything started to shift. Slowly, quietly. We began talking about combining finances, wedding plans, future house, kids, all the normal things people talk about when they think they're building a life together. One night, he asked to see my full financial breakdown. Income, expenses, savings, investments. I showed him everything. Yes, I keep a spreadsheet. I'm an engineer. That's just who I am. He scanned through it casually at first. Then his finger stopped. Right on one line. $1,500. Monthly transfer. He tapped it. So, this just continues forever? I looked up at him. Yes. Even after we're married? Especially after we're married, I said. My income will likely increase. I'll probably increase it too. He leaned back slightly. That's $18,000 a year, Emily. I'm aware. That's a down payment. That's a vacation. That's college savings. We'll fund those too, I said calmly. I make enough. He didn't argue. Not then. He just nodded, closed the spreadsheet, and changed the subject. But he didn't drop it. Not really. Over the next few weeks, it came back. Sideways. Small comments. Subtle ones. Must be nice to have someone just hand you money every month. My parents planned for their retirement. Do they really need that much? Each time I let it slide. I told myself he just didn't understand yet, that once he saw the full picture, he would, because I loved him. And when you love someone, you tend to give them the benefit of explanations they haven't earned yet. 3 weeks ago, we were reviewing wedding catering estimates. $87 per person, 140 guests. You do the math. We were sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread out, calculators open. And then, he said it. Not sideways this time. Not subtle. Direct. Clear. I think you should stop sending money to your parents, Daniel said, or at least cut it in half. They should have saved better. It's not our responsibility to fund their retirement. I remember putting the binder down very carefully. Like if I moved too fast, something fragile would shatter. They didn't have anything to save, I said. They were refugees. Everything went into survival, and into me. That was their choice, he replied. His tone was calm. Too calm. Parents are supposed to provide for their kids. That doesn't mean you owe them money for the rest of your life. I stared at him. You think working 18-hour days so I could graduate debt-free was just standard parenting? You're being dramatic, he said. Lots of people struggle. Something in my chest shifted. Not loudly, but permanently. That doesn't mean their kids have to bankroll them forever. I sat there for a long moment. 30 seconds, maybe. He was looking at me like he'd just made a perfectly reasonable point. Like we were discussing utility bills. Like this was normal. And that's when I realized this wasn't about money. Not really. It was about how he saw the world. And how he saw the two people who gave me everything. I'll consider it, I said finally. And I meant it. Just not in the way he thought. Because I wasn't considering reducing the money. I already knew that answer. I was considering what this meant. About him. About us. About whether I could marry someone who could look at my parents' lives and summarize them with, they should have saved better. I considered it for exactly 1 week. And in that week, everything changed. The week after that conversation felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful. Just quiet in the way a house feels after something has cracked inside the walls and you can't see the damage yet, but you know it's there. Daniel acted like he'd made a practical suggestion. Like I'd overreacted by going silent. He sent me 2 wedding venue options the next morning. Texted me a screenshot of linen colors that afternoon. Asked if I thought ivory looked more elegant than champagne. I answered when necessary. Short replies, no warmth. Because once somebody says something that reveals the architecture of their character, you can't unknow it. You can't slide back into the version of them you preferred. You can try. People do it every day. But all you're really doing is decorating a truth you don't want to live inside. I kept hearing his voice. They should have saved better. Each time I replayed it, it landed harder. Not because it was cruel in a loud way, but because it was cruel in a casual way. As if my parents' entire history could be reduced to poor planning. As if war, displacement, language barriers, humiliation, chronic exhaustion, and the slow violence of starting over from nothing were just accounting errors. By the 3rd day, I stopped asking myself whether I was being too sensitive. By the 4th, I stopped imagining that this was something a long conversation could fix. By the 5th, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I just needed to do it properly. So first I called a financial advisor. Not some expensive private wealth manager in a glass office with abstract art and a handshake that costs $400 by itself. Just a fee-only advisor through my company's benefits program. Practical, efficient. The kind of person who says things like, let's structure that conservatively, and means it as reassurance. I explained what I wanted. I wanted to increase my parents' monthly support from $1,500 to $2,000. I wanted it automatic. I wanted it protected. And I wanted it arranged so that if something happened to me, the payments would continue for a defined period from a dedicated account. He was quiet for a second after I finished, then said, "That's very doable." There was something about hearing those words that made me feel steadier. Very doable. Not reckless, not emotional, not irresponsible. Doable. He walked me through the setup. A dedicated account, an automatic index transfer, a trust-like arrangement that would keep the payments running under specific conditions, even if I became unable to manage them personally. Setup fee, $400. Worth every cent. When the call ended, I sat at my desk for a while, staring at the confirmation email. I should have felt dramatic. Triumphant, maybe. Instead, I felt calm. That was the strangest part. The certainty. The almost eerie absence of doubt. Because once the decision was made, my body seemed to understand before my mind finished catching up. This wasn't me choosing my parents over my fiancé. This was me refusing to choose a future built on contempt. The second thing I did was move money. My personal savings. Not the wedding fund. Not anything shared. My own money from before the relationship. $34,000. Enough to keep the support going for over a year, even if I lost my job tomorrow. I transferred it in one clean motion. There is something almost sacred about clicking confirm when you know exactly why you're doing it. No hesitation. No bargaining. Just the quiet force of alignment. The third thing I did was call my parents. My father answered. He always answers like he's halfway between suspicion and affection. Emily, everything okay? His accent is softer than it used to be, but certain consonants still catch. Hard edges from another country, another life. Everything's fine, I said. I just wanted to tell you something before it happens. Pause. That got his attention. What happened? I'm increasing the monthly transfer. It'll be $2,000 starting this month. Silence. Then immediately. No. I actually smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was so predictably him. Dad! No, too much. $1,500 already too much. It's not too much. For us it is. For me it isn't. He exhaled hard through his nose, the way he does when he thinks logic is about to lose to stubbornness, and he hates that possibility. Emily, listen to me. You have your own life, your wedding, your future. My mother must have heard his tone because I could hear her in the background asking what was wrong. I said more gently, Mom there? A second later, the phone shifted. Emily? Her voice already sounded worried. I repeated it for her. The increase. Starting immediately. It was done. And then she started crying. Softly at first, not dramatic crying. Not the kind meant to be heard. The kind people do when gratitude and shame and love arrive at the same time and they don't know which feeling they're supposed to hold first. Mom, I said quietly, my throat tightening, please don't cry. You do too much. I don't do enough. That only made her cry harder. My father came back onto the line after that, and he argued with me for 11 minutes. Yes, 11. I know because I looked at the call timer when I hung up and almost laughed. He tried pride. He tried reason. He tried guilt. He tried the old move where he says things like, we are not helpless, in the tone of a man trying to defend not just himself, but his entire generation. And I let him talk. Then I said, Dad, I love you, but this is happening whether you like it or not. Silence. Then finally, quieter. You are a good daughter. We don't deserve this. That was the moment that nearly undid me. I turned my chair toward the window and pressed my fingers against my eyes. You deserve more, I said. This is what I can do. We stayed on the line another few minutes after that, talking about ordinary things because that's how my family handles emotion. We approach it, touch it briefly, then retreat into soup recipes and whether the tomatoes in their yard are coming in too early this year. When I hung up, I just sat there. The apartment was still, the kind of stillness that lets the truth stand up fully. I was not confused. I was grieving. That's different. Confusion asks questions. Grief already knows. Saturday afternoon, I called Daniel and asked him to come over. He sounded relieved. Too relieved. Like he'd mistaken my silence for contemplation in his favor. Sure, he said. You okay? I'm fine, I told him. Come by around 3. He arrived in a good mood. That part still feels surreal to me. He had shopping bags in one hand and sunglasses resting on top of his head. He said he'd been to brunch with friends. Kissed me at the door like this was an ordinary Saturday. Like we were still standing inside the version of our life that existed before he told me my parents should have saved better. I stepped aside and let him in. He looked around, smiling a little. So, he said, setting the bags near the counter, did you think about what we discussed? I did not answer immediately. Sit down. Something in my voice must have reached him then. The smile faded. He sat at the kitchen table. I stayed standing. Not for effect. I just couldn't sit. The kitchen looked painfully normal. Afternoon light on the counter. The coffee mug I'd forgotten to rinse in the sink. A folded dish towel near the stove. It's strange, the details you remember when your life is about to reroute. I folded my hands once, then unfolded them. I'm not reducing the payments to my parents, I said. His jaw tightened, just slightly. I've increased them. He blinked. What? It's $2,000 a month now. I set it up formally through a protected structure. It continues regardless of circumstance. The decision is made. He stared at me, and I watched his face move through 4 expressions in maybe 2 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, anger, then something colder than all 3. You increased it, he said slowly, after I specifically asked you to stop. You asked me to consider it, I said. I considered it. That's not what I meant. I know. He sat back in his chair as if distance might help him process what he was hearing. That's $24,000 a year, Emily. Yes. That is insane. No, it isn't. That's a down payment. That's childcare. That's family money. I felt something inside me sharpen. It's support for the 2 people who gave up everything so I could have the life you're currently trying to budget. He stood up so fast the chair legs scraped against the floor. We cannot build a future if you keep giving your money away like this. My money, I said evenly, not ours. His eyes narrowed. So my opinion means nothing. Your opinion was heard. That's not what I asked. No, I said. What you asked was that I become somebody I'm not. He laughed then. Once. A short, disbelieving sound with no warmth in it. Wow. I didn't say anything. He started pacing, hands in his hair, then on his hips, then cutting through the air as he spoke. You know what this feels like? He said. It feels like you chose them over me. There it was. The sentence he'd probably been rehearsing in his head all week. Simple, wounded, designed to make me the unreasonable one. But by then, I was too far inside the truth for it to work. I chose to keep faith with the people who sacrificed everything for me, I said. If that feels like choosing them over you, then yes. He stared at me as if I'd slapped him. I cannot believe this. There's one more thing, I said. He went still, and suddenly the room felt smaller, the air heavier. The exact moment before a life changes has a physical presence. I swear it does. It gathers in your throat, in your shoulders, in the silence between two heartbeats. I looked at him and saw all at once the whole future I was no longer willing to walk into. Every future dinner where my parents would be tolerated but not honored. Every future budget conversation where their needs would be framed as waste. Every future child may be hearing that family is only worth helping when it's convenient. Every future version of me becoming quieter to preserve peace with a man who mistook compassion for poor financial boundaries. And beneath all that, the deepest truth of all, love is not enough when respect is missing at the foundation. I took a breath. I think we should end the engagement. For 1 second, he didn't move, didn't blink, didn't speak. It was as if the sentence had entered the room but not yet landed inside his body. Then his face changed. Not anger first. Shock. Pure, unguarded shock. You're not serious. I am. Over this? Not over $2,000 a month, I said. Over what you asked me to do. Over what you said about my parents. Over the fact that you think what they survived can be summarized as bad planning. His voice rose then, not into a shout exactly, but into that brittle volume people use when control is slipping and they're trying to hold on to superiority instead. You are blowing this completely out of proportion. No, I said quietly. I'm seeing it clearly. He stepped closer to the table, palms flat against the wood. I was trying to think about our future, and I was thinking about mine. He looked at me like he still believed this was salvageable if he found the right combination of frustration and charm. Emily, he said, softer now, we are talking about your parents, not ours. Marriage means priorities change. That sentence did something final inside me, because there it was again. Not cruelty by accident, cruelty by framework. Your parents, not ours. As if marriage required disowning the people who built me. As if love demanded amputation. I shook my head once. No, I said. Marriage means building with someone whose values make the structure stronger. This doesn't. He stared at me. You're making a mistake. Maybe, I said, but I'm keeping my parents. And for the first time since he'd walked in, he seemed to understand that I was not threatening. Not arguing. Not posturing. I was done. The silence after that was awful. Not loud. Not cinematic. Just awful in the way endings often are. Two people standing in a room, still filled with the furniture of a future that no longer exists. Then slowly, with hands that looked almost too steady for the moment, he reached for my engagement ring. I had taken it off earlier and left it in the bedroom drawer because some instinct in me knew I didn't want it on my hand when I ended things. He noticed the absence now. His eyes flicked down to my bare finger, then back up to my face. Something in him hardened. Not heartbreak, pride. He gave a tight nod. Fine, he said. One word. Flat. Controlled, dangerous in its restraint. And that was when I knew this wasn't over. Not really, because some people accept loss, and some people turn it into a campaign. He grabbed his bags, walked to the door, opened it, then stopped without turning around. You'll regret this, he said. I didn't answer. A second later, the door closed behind him, and I stood there alone in my kitchen, listening to the echo of it. Not crying. Not yet. Just standing very still in the wreckage of a future I had chosen to destroy, before it could destroy something far more important in me. The silence after he left didn't feel like relief. It felt like impact, like something had collided with my life at full speed, and only now, in the quiet, I was starting to understand the damage. I didn't move for a long time, just stood there in the kitchen, one hand resting lightly on the back of the chair he had been sitting in, as if the imprint of the moment might still be there. Then, slowly, I exhaled. And the first thought that came wasn't, did I do the right thing? It was, this is going to get complicated. Ending an engagement isn't just emotional. It's logistical. It's social. It's financial. It's everyone else's opinions inserting themselves into a decision they don't understand. By Sunday evening, the first wave hit. His mother. She called twice. I didn't answer. Not because I was afraid of the conversation, but because I already knew exactly how it would go. The voicemail confirmed it. "Emily," her voice said, tight with controlled anger. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but Daniel is devastated. We've already put deposits down for the venue and the florist. You owe us an explanation, and you owe us that money back. Call me." I listened to it once, then deleted it. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Because I wasn't going to start negotiating my decision through someone else's outrage. The deposits. Right, that part was real and fair. So I sat down that night and pulled up the numbers. Venue, $3,500 deposit. Florist, $800. Photographer, $600. All paid from our joint wedding fund, a fund we had both contributed to equally. Total in the account, $9,200. My share, $4,600. I stared at the spreadsheet for a moment, then typed out a message. Simple, direct. You can keep the entire wedding fund, all $9,200. Use it to recover the deposits. I won't ask for my half back. I read it once. No emotion, no commentary. Just a clean exit. Then I hit send. He didn't respond. Monday morning, I went to work. That part might sound strange, but routine is grounding when everything else feels unstable. Same desk, same code, same coffee. Same version of me, at least on the surface. Around 10:15 a.m., I got an email. From Daniel. Not to my personal inbox. To my work email. Subject line. "We need to talk about your financial obligations." I opened it and felt something inside me go very, very still. It wasn't a conversation. It was a list. Bullet points. Itemized. Dinners, trips, gifts. A weekend getaway he had paid for on my birthday. Each one had a dollar amount next to it. At the bottom, total $6,340. He wanted me to pay him back. For a relationship we had both lived inside. For choices he had made freely. For moments that, until recently, had been called love. I read it twice. Not because I didn't understand it. Because I needed to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting something that absurd. I wasn't. I forwarded it to my personal email. Closed the tab. And went back to work. No reply. Because some things don't deserve engagement. They deserve documentation. Tuesday it escalated, but not directly. That would have been easier. Instead, it spread sideways. My college roommate texted me first. "Hey, kind of a weird question. Daniel called me?" I stared at the message, then typed back. "What did he say?" "He asked if you were okay, like, mentally, if something had happened. Said you'd been acting different." I felt my jaw tighten. Different. Yes, I had become someone who refused to marry him. That must have been very confusing. An hour later, a coworker leaned over the divider between our desks. "Hey, do you know a Daniel?" I turned slowly. "Yes." He texted me, asked if you'd seemed unstable at work lately. Unstable. There it was. The narrative. Not angry ex. Concerned partner. Not conflict of values. Mental breakdown. I smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. And something about predictability makes things easier to handle. "I'm fine," I said. "We ended things. He's having trouble with it." My coworker nodded, a little awkwardly. "Yeah, figured something like that." He didn't ask more. That's one thing I've learned. People sense when there's a boundary. And if you hold it calmly enough, most of them respect it. Wednesday morning, his mother called again. This time I answered. Not because I wanted to talk. Because I wanted to, cleanly. "Emily," she said immediately, not even waiting for a greeting. "She is broken. Absolutely broken. Do you understand what you've done?" I closed my eyes briefly. Grounded myself. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "I ended an engagement due to a fundamental incompatibility. I've already offered Daniel the full wedding fund. I'm not sure what else you expect from me." "Incompatibility?" she snapped. "She asked you to be smart with money. That's what partners do." There it was. Same framework. Different voice. "She asked me to cut off my parents," I said. "That's not financial planning. That's cruelty." "Oh, here we go," she said, her tone sharpening. "The refugee story again. Everyone has a hardship story, Emily. My parents struggled too. You don't see me asking my husband to send them checks every month." Something inside me went quiet. Not hurt, not anger, just clarity. Because in that sentence, she had done exactly what Daniel had done. Reduced my parents' lives to a rhetorical inconvenience. A comparison point. A story. I opened my eyes. "I think this conversation is over," I said. "You're being selfish." I hung up. Blocked the number. And just like that, that channel closed. For 3 days. Things went quiet. No calls, no messages, no emails. It almost felt like the storm had passed. I should have known better, because Thursday evening, my phone rang. My father. He never calls in the evening. He goes to bed at 8:30. Decades of early shifts rewired his body permanently. So when I saw his name on the screen at 7:12 p.m., something in my chest tightened immediately. I answered on the first ring. "Dad, is everything okay?" There was a pause. Then, "A woman called your mother today." Cold. Direct. I sat down without thinking. "Who?" "She said she was your fiancé." My stomach dropped. "Ex-fiancé," I said quietly. "What did she say?" Another pause. I could hear the television in the background. My mother's evening shows. Familiar. Normal. Completely at odds with what was about to land. "She told your mother you are in financial trouble," he said slowly. "That you have debt. That you are hiding it from us." My hand tightened around the phone. "She said the money you send us is money you cannot afford. That we are being selfish by taking it." I closed my eyes. There it was. The line. The one you don't cross. And he had crossed it. "Dad," I said carefully, "none of that is true. I have zero debt. My savings are solid. The money I send you is something I can easily afford." Silence. Then, "Why did you end the engagement?" I hadn't told them. Not really. I had said it didn't work out, because I didn't want them to feel responsible. But now, that wasn't an option anymore. "Because he asked me to stop sending you money," I said. "And he said you should have saved better." Silence. Longer this time. Heavy. I could hear my mother in the background, her voice softer now, asking something I couldn't make out. Then my father again. "She said this about us." "Yes. And you ended it because of this." "It was the biggest reason." Another pause. Then, quietly, "You should not have done that for us." That hit harder than anything else, because it was exactly what I had tried to avoid. "Dad," I said softly, "I didn't do it for you." He didn't respond. "I did it because someone who believes that about you is not someone I can build a life with." The line stayed silent for a moment. Then I heard him clear his throat. Small. Controlled. The way he always does when emotion threatens to show itself. "Come for dinner Sunday," he said. Just like that. No speech. No commentary. Just an invitation. My mother's stew. His version of love. "I'll be there," I said. Friday morning, I made another decision. I called a lawyer. Not dramatic. Not aggressive. Just practical. A family law attorney recommended by my financial advisor. $250 for a consultation. I explained everything. The email. The calls to my friends. The message to my coworker. The lie to my parents. He listened. Took notes. Then leaned back slightly. "The contact with your parents and colleagues," he said, "especially the false statements, those could support a harassment claim." That word sat in the air for a second. Harassment. Clinical. Accurate. Unemotional. "I'd recommend a cease and desist letter," he continued. "Formal, specific. It often stops things before they escalate further." "How much?" I asked. $350. I nodded. "Do it." He drafted it that afternoon. Clear. Direct. Outlined the behaviors. Documented the false statements. Stated that any further contact with me, my family, or my workplace would result in formal legal action. It was sent certified mail before the end of the day. After that, I wrote one final email. Short, no anger, no explanation. Just closure. "I've offered you the full $9,200 wedding fund. That offer stands for 30 days. After that, I will split it 50-50 as originally contributed. The list of relationship expenses you sent has no legal basis. I will not be paying it. A cease and desist regarding contact with my family and colleagues has been issued. I wish you well. Please do not contact me again." I read it once, then sent it. And that was it. Not dramatic. Not satisfying. Just done. Or at least, as done as things ever are when someone doesn't want them to be. Saturday morning, I woke up earlier than usual. No alarm. Just awake. The kind of awake that comes when your life has shifted and your body hasn't quite figured out what to do with the extra space yet. For a few seconds, I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to locate myself in the timeline. Then it came back. The breakup, the calls, the email, the lawyer, the silence. I rolled onto my side and reached for my phone. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing. It was the first clean quiet I'd had in days. And somehow, that felt louder than everything that came before it. The response didn't come from Daniel. It came from his father. Late morning, a text. "She showed me the cease and desist. I want you to know I had no idea she contacted your parents. That was wrong. I told her that." I read it twice. Then kept reading. "She doesn't want to hear it right now, but I told her. For what it's worth, I always respected your commitment to your family. Not many people your age think like that. I'm sorry it ended this way. I leaned back against the headboard, exhaled slowly. There's something disorienting about encountering reason inside a situation that has otherwise been defined by the absence of it. Same family, different compass. I typed back. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I'm sorry it ended this way too. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. That exchange wasn't about continuing anything. It was about closing a door with dignity. His mother, however, operated differently. She didn't contact me directly. She sent someone else, a number I didn't recognize. A message that arrived Sunday morning, just as I was getting ready to leave for my parents' house. Lawyers won't protect you from karma. I stared at the screen for a second. Then another message followed. What goes around comes around. You don't get to break a man like that and walk away clean. I didn't respond. Didn't block the number either. I just took a screenshot, forwarded it to my lawyer, then set my phone down. Because at some point, you realize engaging with chaos doesn't reduce it. It feeds it. My parents' house looked exactly the same as it always did. Small, neat, familiar in a way that feels almost physical. The front steps still creaked slightly when I walked up them. The screen door still stuck halfway unless you pushed it just right. I let myself in without knocking. "Mom," I called. "In the kitchen." Of course she was. The smell hit me before I even reached the doorway. Lamb, root vegetables. That spice blend she refuses to write down because you must feel it, not measure it. My father was already at the table, watching something on the small TV mounted in the corner. Volume a little too loud. He turned it down when he saw me. "Emily." Just my name, but the way he said it carried everything else. I walked over and kissed his cheek. Then my mother pulled me into a hug that lasted a second longer than usual. Not dramatic, just anchored. We didn't talk about Daniel right away. That's not how my family works. We ate first. Simple, quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't empty, just full of things that don't need to be spoken immediately. At one point, my mother reached across the table and rested her hand on mine. "You are a good girl," she said softly. I almost laughed. "I'm 30, Mom. You are still my girl." There was no argument for that. My father mostly ate in silence, but near the end of the meal, he set his fork down and looked at me. "The new amount," he said. "It is too much." I smiled slightly. "It's done, Dad." He shook his head. Then, after a moment, "At least let me fix your brakes. I heard them last time. They are not good." There it was. The trade. The one we've always had. I give. He gives back. Not in money. In labor. In care. In the only currency he fully trusts. "Deal," I said. He nodded once. Satisfied. That was his version of balance. And I've learned not to take that away from him. After dinner, my mother packed leftovers into containers. Of course she did. It's non-negotiable. She handed me a Tupperware like it was part of the exit ritual. "Eat," she said. "I will. You forget sometimes." "I don't forget." "You forget." We both knew she was right. I stayed a little longer than usual. Not because anything was unresolved. Because I didn't feel the need to leave quickly. That was new. Before, there was always something waiting. A plan, a schedule, a person. Now, there was just space. When I got home, the apartment felt different. Not empty. Just rearranged. Subtly. Like something had been removed that I hadn't fully realized was taking up so much room. The wedding binder was gone. No catering estimates on the counter. No engagement ring in the drawer. He had taken it. I had told him to. The closet had more space. The bathroom was just mine. I set the Tupperware on the counter, changed into something comfortable, then sat on the couch and ate slowly, the way my mother always tells me to. The stew tasted exactly like it always had. Warm, familiar, grounding. And somewhere in the middle of that quiet meal, my mind started doing what it had been avoiding all week. It replayed everything, from the beginning. Not just the ending, the good parts, because they were real. He had made me laugh. He remembered my coffee order. He surprised me with it on days I didn't even realize I needed it. He was good at his job. Driven. Confident. There were entire stretches of time where we worked, where it felt easy, natural, safe. But underneath all of that, there had been something else, something quieter, something I hadn't been listening for. A belief that people are responsible for their circumstances in a clean, simple way. That hardship is usually the result of poor decisions. That survival stories are explanations, not realities. That my parents' lives could be summarized as a failure to plan. And that belief hadn't appeared out of nowhere during a conversation about catering. It had always been there. I just hadn't recognized it. Or maybe I hadn't wanted to. The cease and desist worked. No more calls. No more emails. No more messages through other people. Silence. Real silence this time. About a week later, I got a notification from my bank. The wedding fund. Transferred. All $9,200. No message attached. No conditions. No follow-up. Just accepted. I stared at the notification for a moment, then closed the app. I didn't feel victorious. Just finished. On the 1st of the next month, the transfer went through. $2,000. Right on schedule. I didn't check it immediately. I didn't need to. I already knew it would be there. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from my mom. A photo. I opened it and just stared. My father, standing in the hallway, wearing a new pair of work boots. Good ones. Waterproof. Proper support. No duct tape. No worn-down soles. No quiet compromise. Just new. My mom had typed one line under the photo. He said they are too expensive. I bought them anyway. I smiled, then laughed a little, because that sounded exactly right. I looked at the picture for a long time. Longer than I expected to. Because that's what the money was. Not numbers. Not transfers. Not $18,000 a year or $24,000 a year. It was this. A man who had worn the same boots for 3 years so his daughter could have a future. Standing in a hallway. Finally wearing a pair he didn't have to justify. That's what I chose. Not over someone, but for something. I set the photo as my phone background. Not forever, but for now. Because sometimes you need a reminder. Not of what you lost, but of what you refused to lose. He told me I would regret it. Maybe. Life is long. Regret is unpredictable. But sitting there on my couch in an apartment that was quieter but somehow more honest, I realized something. Even if I did regret it someday, I would never regret this part. Not protecting my parents. Not honoring what they gave me. Not walking away from someone who couldn't see the difference between obligation and love. And that